Hey there, fellow explorer, and welcome to a special Espirito edition of the Deep Dive.
Espirito.
Yeah, Espirito Deep, you could say.
I like that.
You know, it's Italian for expert, so we're
Ah.
taking our expertise to the next level for you today.
All right, welcome everybody to another deep dive. Today we're diving into something a little different. We are going to look at St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. Um, and when you think about it, you think of all the shamrocks and, green beer and all that. But there's actually a lot more to it. We found in our research that it's gone from like a purely religious holiday to something much bigger.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think when you think about March 17th, you think of the green, the parades, but it's so much more than that. It's
Yeah.
history, it's faith, it's the evolution of a culture. So I think it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. Where do we even start? Well, let's start with the man himself.
All right, St. Patrick. The patron saint of Ireland. But here's the thing, and this kind of blew my mind a little bit when I was reading about it. He wasn't actually Irish.
Right.
He was born Manwinsukat.
Mm.
And he wasn't born in Ireland. He was born in Roman Britain, late 4th century. So that's kind of the first misconception that we have to clear up. Yeah, and not only that, but he actually, was taken to Ireland as a slave when he was only 16 years old during a raid. So can you imagine that? I mean, we think about St. Patrick's Day and all the celebration, but the guy had a really rough start.
Absolutely.
Mm.
16 years old, taken as a slave. He was a shepherd while he was enslaved. And that's really where his connection to Ireland begins.
Yeah, and that's where things start to get really interesting because, we always talk about how, hardships can shape people's lives. And it
Right.
seems like that's exactly what happened here because while he was a slave, he turned to Christianity. He had a spiritual awakening.
Absolutely. And that really shaped his entire future. But the story doesn't end there.
Hmm.
He eventually escaped, went back to Britain, but then he had this vision. And it called him back to Ireland to be a missionary. So he went back to the place where he was a slave. Can you imagine doing that?
That's incredible. I think it says a lot about his character and how he was able to overcome, such hardship and then to even willingly return to the place where all that happened. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he ended up devoting his life to spreading Christianity in Ireland. And he actually played a huge role in converting a lot of people. And that's, the reason that he's considered a saint. And his legacy lives on to this day.
And you can't talk about St. Patrick without talking about the legend of him driving all the snakes out of Ireland.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's probably the first thing you think about when you think about St. Patrick. But the interesting thing is geologists don't really think that there were ever any snakes in Ireland. So what's going on here? The interpretation is that the snakes are a symbol. They represent the pagan religions that were around at the time.
Ah, that's interesting.
So it's more like a spiritual cleansing than a literal, snake extermination.
Right, like he was driving out the old beliefs and bringing in Christianity.
Exactly. And of course, he dies on March 17th. And that becomes St. Patrick's Day. It was his feast day, a day for remembering him. But we've come a long way from that, haven't we?
Yeah, because, back then it was a purely religious holiday, a very solemn, occasion. And it's fascinating how it's transformed over time. And I think a big part of that is because of the Irish diaspora, the Irish people who emigrated to other parts of the world, like North America. They took their traditions with them and really helped shape how St. Patrick's Day is celebrated today.
Yeah, and you see that happening with a lot of holidays.
Right.
They start off as one thing, but then as people move around and cultures mix, things start to change.
And I think a great example of that is the parades. They really started becoming a thing in North America. It was a way for Irish communities to show their pride and connect with their heritage in a new land.
Absolutely. You can imagine what it must have been like for those early Irish immigrants. They're in a new country trying to fit in, and then they have this day where they can just be themselves, celebrate their culture. It must have been really special.
Yeah. And alongside the parades, you also see other traditions starting to pop up, like wearing green, which green is the color of Ireland. But it also represents, the lush landscape and the coming of spring. It's all tied together.
Right, and it's such a simple thing, but it's so effective.
Yeah.
Just by wearing green, you're making a statement. You're showing your Irish pride. And the shamrock, too. I mean, that's become like the ultimate symbol of St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, and there's that story about how St. Patrick uses shamrock to explain the Holy Trinity, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Right. 3 leaves on one stem. It's a really clever analogy. And it just goes to show how these symbols can have such a powerful meaning.
For sure. So we've got the parades, we've got the green, we've got the shamrocks. But we can't forget about the music and the dancing.
Of course not. I
Yeah.
mean, what's St. Patrick's Day without some traditional Irish music and some step dancing?
Exactly. It's all part of the experience. And then there's the food, corned beef and cabbage,
Yeah.
Guinness, all those things that people associate with the day.
Yeah. It's interesting how certain foods become so connected to specific holidays. It's like they become part of the ritual.
Right. So we've talked about how St. Patrick's Day evolved in North America, but it's become even bigger than that now, hasn't it?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's celebrated all over the world now.
Yeah.
You see landmarks lit up in green in countries that have nothing to do with Ireland.
It's pretty crazy when you think about it, how a holiday that started as a religious observance in one small country has now become this global phenomenon. And I think it speaks to the power of culture, how it can transcend borders and bring people together.
Absolutely. And it also shows how open people are to experiencing different cultures.
Yeah.
You don't have to be Irish to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. It's become this really inclusive holiday.
And it's not just about partying and drinking either. There's a real appreciation for Irish culture and heritage behind it all.
Right, and I think that's really important. It's about celebrating a culture in a way that's respectful and authentic.
And, even though St. Patrick's Day has all these traditions, it's still evolving. It's not stuck in the past.
Yeah, you see new traditions popping up all the time.
Yeah.
New music, new ways of celebrating. It's a living, breathing holiday. And that's what makes it so special. It can adapt and change with the times while still staying true to its roots.
So after all this, what's the main thing that you take away from St. Patrick's Day?
For me, it's a reminder that even the simplest things can have a really deep meaning, like wearing green or a shamrock. It's a way of connecting with something bigger than yourself, a history, a culture, a sense of belonging. And I think that's something we all crave.
Yeah, I agree. It's more than just a day of partying. It's a celebration of a culture. And it's a reminder that even though we all come from different backgrounds, we can still find common ground and celebrate together.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really powerful message, especially in today's world.
So any final thoughts?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, we've looked at St. Patrick's Day. We've seen how much history and meaning is packed into it. Makes you think about all the other holidays we celebrate, how they started, how they've changed over time. It's a whole world of stories just waiting to be explored.
That's a great point. So maybe next time you're celebrating a holiday, take a moment to think about its origins. You might be surprised by what you discover.
All right, thanks for joining us on another deep dive.
Always a pleasure.